I probably should have smelled pine trees first. 3 days driving cross-country, 18 months working in Iceland, and the one moment I finally rolled down my truck window. I was expecting the earthy, familiar smell of damp ground and old leaves, the scent of the 5 acres my granddad left me. But what slapped me in the face instead was chlorine. Sharp, cold, artificial. And right then I knew something was way, way off. My land sat smack in the middle of one of those fancy new developments, cookie-cutter houses, lawns trimmed like golf courses, big neighborhood sign at the gate. My 5 acres were like the hole in a donut, surrounded on all sides, but totally separate, at least legally. Before I left, I'd put up a solid wooden fence just to keep things the way I liked: wild grass, pine trees, birds all left alone. I wanted it peaceful. That Tuesday afternoon around 2 o'clock, I turned onto my little private road and just froze. My fence gone. Not broken, not knocked down, completely gone. In its place was a winding stone walkway straight out of some luxury resort leading to this gigantic infinity pool, right in the middle of my land. There was a thatched roof, cabana, pricey-looking lounge chairs, little cocktail tables, and about a dozen folks just sprawled out, sunbathing, laughing, drinks in hand like they owned the place. I sat in my truck a long minute, hands on the wheel, just blank. This wasn't some little oops, your line's a bit off. They'd torn down my fence and built an entire amenity area on my land. I shut off the engine, got out, and walked over. Nobody noticed me. Not until this guy in his 50s, wearing a pool manager polo with a badge, turned around and spotted me. He marched over chest, all puffed up, the type who spends retirement looking for someone to boss around. "Excuse me, sir, you can't be here," he says. "This is private community property." I looked around the pool, the cabana, the walkway, then back at him. "I think there's been a little mix-up," I said, somehow managing to stay calm. "This is my property." He straight up burst out laughing. Not a polite laugh like I just told the funniest joke he'd heard all year. "Your property, buddy, listen. This land's been abandoned for years. The HOA took legal possession under the abandonment clause when the owner stopped paying taxes and vanished." My hand slipped into my pocket phone on record. "You want to explain that again?" I asked. "Pretty sure I've been paying property taxes just fine." "I don't know who you think you are," he snapped, "but you need to leave before I call the cops. The pool and cabana were built legally, permits, and all this is phase 2 of the community's amenities." I nodded, still recording. "I get it. I'll check into things." I turned back to my truck. Behind me, I heard him loudly telling the others some vagrant tried to claim he owned the pool area. People stared at me like I was nuts. I drove straight to a coffee shop, hopped on the county's property tax portal. Everything was up to date. Every payment auto-deducted just like I set up before I left for overseas. No back taxes. Nothing about abandonment. Pulled up my deed, crystal clear, 5 acres legal description in my family since long before this neighborhood even existed. Never part of the HOA, never could be without my say-so and signature. That's when I realized this wasn't neighbors being pushy. This was a deliberate land grab. That night, I went out and took photos and videos of everything: the pool, the cabana, walkways, electrical wiring. I found where my fence posts had been chopped, even found my old no trespassing signs piled up behind their pump shed. 2 days later, a certified letter showed up from some strip mall law office. It demanded I stop harassing residents and trespassing on community property, saying my false claims of ownership were distressing innocent families. Funny enough, that letter actually helped it prove the HOA was officially claiming my land. So I got busy gathering what I called my nuclear option. I went down to the county clerk, got certified copies of every record my granddad's original deed from 1967 included. Got copies of the neighborhood survey map showing my lot as its own parcel. Then I hit the city planning office to check the pool's building permit. That's when things got interesting. The application had my signature. Except, of course, I never signed anything. I was in Iceland. The forgery wasn't even close. The permit listed my property as HOA land, blatantly false. But the real kicker came when I hired an independent surveyor. Not only was the whole pool built on my land, but the filtration equipment was sitting right on top of my septic line. They'd poured a massive concrete slab, no clue what was underneath. The surveyor looked at me and said, "Not only is this illegal construction, but it's a potential environmental hazard. If my septic system ever failed or their concrete damaged it, they could end up with contaminated pool water and a public health mess." I kept digging, Turns out the HOA had hyped this phase 2 for over a year, used the promise of a new pool to raise dues and bump up home prices. They'd sold residents on the idea, used construction photos in their marketing to new buyers. This wasn't just trespassing, this was straight-up fraud. I could have called a lawyer right then and there and sued them into oblivion, but I wanted to be smart. The HOA's big annual summer gala was coming up in 2 weeks, planned, of course, to show off their shiny new pool. I decided to wait. Over those 2 weeks, I learned even more. The pool manager, retired accountant, self-appointed head of security and amenities. He'd been the main guy convincing the board that my land was abandoned. I also found out the HOA's insurance policy specifically excluded coverage for construction on property they didn't legally own. That little detail was about to be gold. Gala day rolled around. Party was set to start at 6, so I showed up at 5:30 with a private security crew, a rapid install fence contractor, and a process server loaded with paperwork. Party was in full swing, 60 people, kids swimming, adults sipping drinks. HOA president on the mic mid-speech about community vision when my crew started unloading post-hole diggers. The roar of machinery stopped everything cold. Folks looked around confused as my team marked property lines with spray paint. The president stammered, "Excuse me, what's going on?" I walked over, security at my side. "Sorry to break up your party," I said. "I'm the legal owner here and we're putting up a fence on the property line." Pool manager went ballistic, threatened to call the cops. "Go ahead," I said. "I've got every right and every permit I need." The property line cut right through the pool deck. About 60% of their fancy setup was on my land. The fence went up, splitting the pool in two. Parents yanked their kids out of the water. Board members clustered together, making frantic phone calls. My process server handed the president a legal notice, immediate removal required. I handed over another document. "Here's a temporary license agreement. You can rent the pool for $10,000 a day until you remove everything and restore my land. Or you can start tearing it down now on your own dime." 10 grand a day. People looked like they'd swallowed rocks. The fence was halfway done. The party was over. A few days later, the HOA finally hired a real lawyer who promptly told them they were in deep, deep trouble. Their insurance dropped them like a hot rock. No coverage meant the pool became a massive liability. Residents found out the board had forged documents and burned through community funds. They sued the board personally for gross negligence. Pool manager especially, he'd never verified the land ownership, just forged my signature because nobody was using it. And then came the environmental bombshell. The botched construction had wrecked my septic line. Sewage had been leaking into the groundwater near the pool for months. Health department came down hard, leveled fines left and right. Facing criminal charges, civil liability, and a mutiny in their own community, the HOA caved. The settlement, enough to restore my property, pay all my legal fees, put up an even better fence, and finally build the workshop I'd been dreaming about. They filled in the pool, demolished the cabana, ripped up the walkways. My land was back to how I liked it. Except now there's an 8-foot privacy fence. Private property signs every 20 feet. I built a 2,400 square foot metal shop with solar panels and a backup generator, completely self-sufficient. The pool manager had to sign the check himself. I sat across from him in the lawyer's office, eating a sandwich, watching his hands shake. The HOA never recovered, had to take out special loans. Home values tanked, board members resigned in disgrace. Pool manager moved out after the neighbors made it clear he wasn't welcome. Now every time I mow the grass, I wave to folks passing by where their luxury pool used to be. I keep a copy of their newsletter framed in my shop, shows a photo of the pool under construction, headline, Phase 2, Making Dreams Reality. They thought my silence meant I'd abandoned my land. Really, I was just documenting every step. The lesson. When you're up against people who think power is just a costume they can put on, sometimes the best revenge is patience. Let them dig their own hole. Just keep notes on every shovelful. Now I smell pine trees again. They tried to seize my land while I was gone. I came back to strangers swimming in my backyard, but in the end, I'm the one who got to swim in their tears. So what do you think? Was this justice, or did I go too far? Ever had a run-in with an overreaching HOA or a neighbor with boundary issues? Share your story. I want to hear it.